you and I both believe, Peter, that the Jalen Hurts deal was the thing that started the engine toward getting the Lamar Jackson contract finally done. Jackson was asked about that yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
I didn't worry about Jalen's deal, It was like, we came to terms. We came to something both of us mutually agreed on. Like I said, now we're here.
See, it became clear early in this press conference that there was not going to be a play-by-play, blow-by-blow recounting of the things that happened. From the first question, when he was asked what changed between making a trade demand in early March and signing a contract with the team from which he demanded a trade in late April. And he said, I'm not here to talk about the past. It's all positive. It's all moving forward. He didn't want to start down that. He didn't want to revisit it, and that's his prerogative. And I think in this same vein, he didn't want to start down the road, Peter, that would have had him admit that he had what he wanted, and he finally realized he wasn't going to get what he wanted, so he took what he could. So he just avoided that altogether. And I think that's part of the maturity you're talking about. What good comes from that, really? For us, great headline, great fodder. For him and for the Ravens, nothing good comes from him delving down this path of, I was being stubborn, they were being stubborn, and then the Jalen Hurts deal shows up, and that caused me, with advice from Odell Beckham Jr., to realize if I was ever going to get a deal done, I had to take what the Ravens were going to give me.
Well, let's also be mindful of the fact that in, quote, taking what the Ravens would give me, end quote, the Ravens made him the highest paid player in NFL history, and they did it by, in essence, Mike, guaranteeing the first 3.5 years of a contract, because that's the equivalent of about what happened here. And let's just also make this point of it, that when you think about all the time he has missed, and I've heard everybody say, well, it's that's, he would have, if he had his contract, he would have played in the playoff game against Cincinnati. He would have come back sooner. Hey, bullcrap. He didn't play. That's it. He said he was hurt. That's it. That's all. That's the only thing that matters. It's like people now going back and recreating history and saying, oh yeah, C.J. Stroud wasn't really the second pick. The Houston Texans traded up and gave C.J. Stroud compensation for Will Smith to shut the spigot off so that nobody would trade for the number 3 pick. Hey, look, they picked C.J. Stroud number 2, period. That's it. And so to me, when I hear things like that, I just say, facts are facts. And you might think facts are inconvenient, public or media people who write stuff like this, but to me, I think the biggest thing that Lamar Jackson did is he looked at the landscape, he looked at his own record, and his record in the last 2 years of being hurt some, and he basically said no matter what any advisor, no matter what anybody was saying to him about all of this, that he understood that Eric DeCosta, Steve Bisciotti, the Baltimore Ravens, were not going to give him what he wanted. So does he want to be a freedom fighter who misses time? Because I'm pretty confident that the Ravens would have said, we'll play Tyler Huntley, we'll play Carson Wentz or Matt Ryan, whoever it is, but we are not giving you a totally guaranteed contract for 4 or 5 years. So I think on both sides, there was intelligence. On the Ravens side, there was some resolve. But I also think if you asked a bunch of general managers in the NFL that you gave Lamar Jackson that contract after the last 2 years, after his very checkered record in the playoffs in his first 5 years in the NFL, man, that's a heck of a contract. And to me, there are times when you look at something and say, the Ravens were right in this regard, the Ravens were generous in this regard, and Lamar Jackson was smart to take this deal.
By the way, those of you who tune in on Friday for the SAT word of the day probably did not have wackadoo and bullcrap on your bingo card. Sometimes you have to wait for the $10 word to come from Peter, but it will come at some point today. I personally prefer wackadoo and bullcrap, but that's just me. The deal is spectacular when we set aside all the other things that got us here, Peter. And he's going to make more over the next 5 years than Jalen Hurts will make over the next 6 years. That, in and of itself, is impressive. One of the things that gets lost in the shuffle when we talk about the classic extension, we forget that there's an existing deal that gets subsumed within the extension. Jalen Hurts signs 5 years, $255. Lamar Jackson signs 5 years, $260. That's just the start of it. What does Hurts have left? He's got 1 year at $4 million and change. It becomes a 6-year, $259 million deal, an extra year of total commitment. For Lamar, he's starting from scratch. He's got nothing. New money, old money doesn't matter. This is the deal. This is it. $260 over 5. And as you said, $156 over 3. He will make that. That is the top cash flow for 3 years under a new contract in NFL history. It bests the $150 million paid to Aaron Rodgers under his most recent deal, assuming he stays with the Jets for 2 years to get it all. And you mentioned that Tom Brady made $76 million during the first 10 years of his career. Here we are with Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in the NFL, two-time NFL MVP, two-time Super Bowl MVP. He signed a 12-year contract 3 years ago. Through the first 3 seasons of that deal, he's made $63 million. Think about that. $93 million more Lamar Jackson will make over the first 3 years of his contract than Patrick Mahomes made over the first 3 years of his deal. I've been saying it somewhat repeatedly. Patrick Mahomes needs to go have a talk with somebody. His agent, Brett Veach, Andy Reid, Clark Hunt, Roger Goodell, somebody. Because Mahomes is getting screwed right now, Peter. And the best evidence of it, Lamar Jackson, 156 over 3. Patrick Mahomes, 63 over 3.
Well, when he signed it, you knew that this contract was not going to look good in the first few years of it because he went light on the first, I think, 4 years, Mike, total, at least 3. But he went light on the first 3 or 4 years so that Kansas City and Brett Veach could maximize free agency and bring in the people they needed to bring in to win. And so that is what I'm sure Brett Veach and Andy Reid would say. And we'll see if Patrick Mahomes is going to be Tom Brady, because Tom Brady always used to say to the Patriots, listen, just spend to the cap. I'm making enough, and I can make $1 jillion off the field. Looks like Patrick Mahomes is making Brady-esque money off the field right now in various things. And, Mike, there are some people who would rather just say, and I'm going to make this up, I don't know. I mean, Patrick Mahomes probably could go sit in a hotel room in Kankakee, Illinois, and sign his name for 3 hours to things and make $1 million. And again, I don't know if that's true, but I mean, I'm just saying that you know there are ways for guys like Patrick Mahomes to make $1 jillion. And he may be, like Brady was, the kind of person who says, man, I just want to win. I'll figure out how much money to make on the other side. Might be. I don't know if he is or not. We'll see.
It's just a fascinating distinction because of what he's accomplished and the issues you have raised consistently about why the Ravens or any other team may want to think twice about making a huge financial commitment to Lamar Jackson. That MVP is 4 years in the rearview mirror, the injury issues that you've discussed. It's just fascinating to me to juxtapose the two and realize where Lamar Jackson is. And I feel like the Ravens eventually recognized there was so much talk about Lamar representing himself and how it did impact him in a negative way, and I do believe it did. We're going to hear from Lamar momentarily, I promise, on representing himself. But At some point, Peter, the Ravens had to ponder the reality of life without Lamar Jackson. They could
they pondered.
They could hunker down, but I think they realized, wait a minute, we want this guy. He may not be driving the best bargain for him. He may not be applying tactics that really work. He may never get a fully guaranteed contract, but we got to give this guy something to get him to show up, or we're not going to be a very good football team. We're not going to be able to put butts in the seats. I mean, Eric DeCosta, I was kind of surprised, candidly admitted one of the reasons they paid Odell Beckham Jr. so much money. He puts butts in the seats. He creates excitement. It's not always about winning. It's about giving people a reason to support your team, to show up. And at some point, Peter, they were going to have to deal with a fan base. They were saying, what the hell? Where's Lamar Jackson? We're here to see Lamar Jackson, not Tyler Huntley. We're here to see Lamar Jackson. And even though his quest was a bit quixotic for a fully guaranteed deal, that stubbornness paid off to the tune of $156 million over 3 years. And in that regard, it's a win, Peter.
Mike, there's 2 points about this that I think are important when you talk about Lamar Jackson's stubbornness, and I get it, and you're right. But so when we were discussing a couple of months ago why in the world it was important for Lamar Jackson to have an agent, I think almost any agent would have said to him after 3 years in the NFL and after winning the MVP in year 2, that on the day that you could start negotiating a new contract, you are not going to play for the money that no matter what the 5th-year option is, anything like that, you're not going to do that. You're going to have to get a new contract now. And so the reason I bring that up is that Lamar Jackson, in his 4th year in the NFL, made $1.77 million. And that is a year and a half after he walked off with the MVP. And so that is part of the price, in my opinion anyway, of not having an agent. That's money that will never come back. And yes, you've done a fantastic job on this deal right here. Don't get me wrong. All praise to you for getting this contract without an agent. But that really, you can't forget the fact that 2 years ago, I don't know what the deal would have been 2 years ago, but I don't think he would have been playing for $1.77 million. And the last thing I would say about this and about how the Ravens go, Mike, one of the reasons I think there was tremendous pressure on the Ravens to see this thing through is that they knew what happened to their crowd in the last 5 years. Okay, in the last 5 years, their crowd and their fan base, Baltimore is a city that is 63% black. And if you went to a Ravens game in 2015, the stands would not be 63% black. But in 2019, 2020, 2021, I know because I go to, I don't know, I've been to 3 or 4 games in person in that period of time. And all I can say is you walk through the parking lots and it's as big or bigger of a minority population grilling, having fun, doing stuff before the game than there is anywhere in the NFL. And I believe that the Ravens knew that if Lamar Jackson wasn't going to play for them anymore or this year, that they would be saying goodbye to a huge chunk of their fan base. And that's one of the reasons why I think you never saw anybody with the Ravens speaking in any sort of either inflammatory or negative way about Lamar Jackson through the whole course of this thing, which really lasted 2 years.
Yeah, every team tells us their goal is to win the Super Bowl every year. The reality is their goal is to make as much money as they can, which includes filling the stadium with fans and getting people interested in your team. You lose your best player, you lose the interest in your team. You lose the capacity of your stadium. That's part of the business of football that they'd rather fans not focus on, but it is part of the reality of the overall industry. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.